do not grant Amazon S3 log delivery group write access to this bucket. This is a kind of funny little setting. It just means like, should the bucket be able to accept logs? Are you going to use this bucket for collecting logs? Think back to turning on the S3 logging. You would grant that permission here, right? If you wanted logs to get dumped in here. But if you're not using this bucket to collect logs, you would leave it here. Okay. So we've now configured all those things, and we're just going to go ahead and create a bucket. And this will take a second. And we can see down here our MC demonstration bucket. I got to rearrange my screen a little bit. All right. So now we've got a bucket, and we have a number of different kinds of things we can do here. We've done block public access. So we said we wanted a secure bucket, right? We can go into properties here. We can see what we've done. We enabled versioning. We enabled default encryption. These server access logging, and we didn't turn some of this stuff on because it just didn't have a convenient logging bucket to throw it in. The object lock we talked about. There are other things that are not security related, like requester pays and transfer acceleration. But you can see here that S3 is a very complex service with lots and lots of like switches and knobs and dials you can use on it. So there's no way in an hour I can cover literally everything. But what you're going to get after you go through that first pass is you're going to get to this screen on this bucket. So if we look at permissions, you can see here we have block public access. You also see access control list. Remember we talked about ACLs. I told you AWS tells you not to use ACLs, but then puts one on the bucket. It does right here. By default, and this is a good thing because you wouldn't be able to access the bucket if it weren't there. The canonical ID of the user, which it says right here, your AWS account is allowed to see and get access to the bucket. Okay. You can do that for other AWS accounts. I would not do that for other AWS accounts. Don't use ACLs, use IAM. Okay. ACLs are really outdated. Now they need to be able to share it with you locally, and they need to leave that setting on. But I would strongly recommend looking at IAM everywhere that you can. That does not include portions of the public internet, but it does include anything you can point to as an Amazon principle or object. So what I mean by that is, I will very briefly here, let's pop open IAM real quick. This isn't a class on IAM, that'll be the next one, but I will just show you very briefly how you might do this and what I mean by it. So remember, what we're trying to do here is create an S3 bucket that this compute instance can talk to, and only compute instances inside this VPC network can talk to. That's our goal. So we don't need any IP CIDR block based access from the outside world. Therefore, we can create a new policy, an IAM policy, that grants us access to that S3 bucket. So let's just go to S3, and I'm just going to do this very briefly. I'm not going to go spelunking into IAM deeply. Never use stars in these IAM policies. They're really dangerous. What I would generally recommend is, you can see there's lots of permissions in here. I would avoid the list stuff. If all that EC2 instance needs to do, if all that compute or container or Lambda or whatever needs to do is write objects and read objects, and that very often that's the case, you need that one. And you need that one. It's really what you want. You don't want list. List creates a vulnerability that if bad guys get into that compute, they can go explore your S3 and steal stuff. We actually do a whole demonstration of that. And that's exactly what happened at Capital One, by the way, is they had list turned on via an IAM role. So why am I talking about IAM versus ACLs? Well, one, when S3 tells you you really shouldn't do something, you should probably pay attention, because it means they've done something that's much better more effective, and more in depth.